Another month has passed, a lot of basketball has been played, lots of different players are making a name for themselves at the college and international level, and because of this, it's time for this month's installment of the mock draft series we do here on this channel, where I post one mock draft every month leading up to the real thing. This is the second update of the mock for this year, and since the last one there have been quite a few changes to the overall landscape, making for an interesting update. This is a good way to keep up with how the top prospects in the class are trending, as well as being able to match them up with potential team fits at the next level. As always, the order of the teams picking in this mock draft are based on the current NBA standings, so they're not just randomly selected by me in any way. Before we start though, it turns out about 67% of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so please, if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but I would also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. Starting at the end of the lottery and working our way up to the highly coveted number 1 pick, the Memphis Grizzlies select Jaden Springer from Tennessee. Springer is an interesting prospect to monitor, and scouts seem to be torn on him and his NBA potential, but he has, without question, been highly productive for Tennessee so far this year. He's still fairly young, being only 18 years old, but he's been an efficient scorer, making 53% of his shots and 56% of his threes, albeit in a small sample size so far, and in the pick and roll, he's shown off an advanced understanding of the game, ranking in the 97th percentile in these possessions in all of college. He lacks the convincing creation and ability to make separation that NBA teams tend to like from their guards, but he's still a strong talent nonetheless. Next up, with the 13th pick in the draft, the Houston Rockets own the Thunder pick, and they select Sharife Cooper from Auburn. Cooper was forced to miss most of the early part of the season due to eligibility issues, but since his debut for the team, he's been making an instant impact, putting up some impressive production. In the 3 games he's played so far, he's averaging a highly impressive 22 points and 10 assists per game, demonstrating an incredibly impressive ability to command the floor, make the right play, let the play develop around him, and appropriately decide whether to attack or give it up. One thing he does need to improve upon is his overall shot selection and perimeter shooting, but again, he just recently returned to the court, and so far, he's done way more good than bad. Next up, with the 12th pick in the draft, the Denver Nuggets select Corey Kispert from Gonzaga. Corey has been flying up draft boards recently because, quite frankly, he's been having a terrific season and has the kind of skill set that will always be useful in the NBA. Corey is pretty much inarguably the draft's best shooter, making 49% of his threes this year, but most importantly is he's not just a shooter. At a strong 6'7" height, he also uses his size to his advantage off the dribble, and when he's forced off the 3-point line, he gets into the paint and finishes incredibly strong and efficient. He's making about 60% of his shots this year and 70% of his 2-point attempts, and seeing as he's averaging 21 points per game this season, it's clearly a big enough sample size to take seriously. Next up, with the 11th pick in the draft, the New York Knicks select Daishen Nix from the G League. Daishen Nix could prove to be one of the best overall floor generals at the point guard position in this draft, and it's still looking like that's an area of need for the Knicks. His floor vision, pure passing ability, and overall decision making all stand out in a big way when he's initiating the offense. With the G League season starting next month, we'll finally be able to see him play against strong competition and assess him from there, but based on what we've seen from him so far, he's a very talented young guard. Up next, with the 10th pick in the draft, the New Orleans Pelicans select Moses Moody from Arkansas. Moody falls into the 3-and-D archetype of a player category, as he has fantastic measurables as a strong 6'6" player with long arms that he uses to pester opponents and make plays on the defensive end with. He's making about 40% of his threes as a good spot-up shooter, and what also impresses scouts is his promising off-ball movement as a slasher and cutter, using that size to finish strong at the basket and make plays without the ball in his hands for easy opportunities. He compares somewhat to players like Mikal Bridges, DeAndre Hunter, and Devin Vassell from recent drafts, but he could have even more offensive upside than all 3 of them. Next up, with the 9th pick of the draft, the Atlanta Hawks select James Bouknight from UConn. Bouknight is another player that has shot up draft boards as the season has progressed because he's been one of the best bucket getters in the nation to this point, and he has a pro-level ability to create. He has a strong ability to handle the ball and get to his spots off the dribble, he's a very good finisher around the basket, he has a nice pull-up jumper in the mid-range, and is a confident shooter from anywhere on the floor. There has been talk about some Hawks players looking for Trae Young to ease back on his offensive carrying ways, and bringing in another scorer like this could help Trae transition into more of a playmaker that trusts those around him. Next up, with the 8th pick in the draft, the Chicago Bulls select Ziaire Williams from Stanford. Williams admittedly got off to a pretty rough start to the season, but recently he's been looking much more comfortable out on the floor, and his production has improved as a result, which is exactly what you want from a top prospect like this. He recently put up a triple-double in a game, he's been much more reliable knocking down his shots, and at 6'8", he's been demonstrating his impressive ability to create off the dribble and confidently pull up with good balance and shoot over defenders with his size and length. That ability to separate raises his ceiling as a scorer, and it's why, despite inconsistent season that he's having so far, scouts are still pretty high on him overall. Up next, with the 7th pick in the draft, the Oklahoma City Thunder own the Rockets pick, and they select Scottie Barnes from Florida State. Barnes is a jack-of-all-trades type of player as a forward who gives you a little bit of everything out on the floor on both ends. He's been compared to Draymond Green for several reasons, as he's a very good playmaker for a player at this position, he's a smart decision-maker, he's incredibly strong, and he has a good handle of the basketball. He currently leads his team in assists despite playing as a forward. He's comfortably shut down opponents on defense at several different positions, and his 7'2" wingspan is highly impressive, which allows him to disrupt tons of plays. He projects as a highly impactful player in any rotation, and whether or not he has legit star potential doesn't really matter in this instance. Next up, funnily enough, at number 6, we once again have the Oklahoma City Thunder picking who own the Miami Heat's pick, and with it, they select Jalen Johnson from Duke. Unfortunately, Johnson has missed a good amount of time this season due to injury, but he has looked very good in the time that we've seen him on the court. He's a strong 6'9" player that can play either forward position on both ends, and he uses his top-tier athleticism, strength, and quickness to overwhelm opponents when he gets to the basket. He seems like a very well-rounded player that can impact both ends of the floor, and if his jumper starts to fall more consistently, his ceiling could be as high as anybody's. Next up, with the 5th pick in the draft, the Sacramento Kings select Jonathan Kuminga from the G League. Kuminga's another player who opted to play in the G League this year before the draft, and their season starts in February, so we will have to wait a bit before we get to see him in action. He is a strong, explosive combo forward with the tools and physical frame as good as anybody in the class, and his ball skills were trending upward when we last saw him on the court. He has the talent to push himself into the conversation to be at the very top of this draft. But we'll revisit that discussion when his season actually gets underway and we see him play again. Up next, with the 4th pick in the draft, the Toronto Raptors select Jalen Green from the G League. Green is a guy that got the G League movement started, as he was ranked the best recruit in the country by a few major outlets, and he bypassed college first to go this route, leading to more players following suit afterward. Green falling outside of the top 3 is by no means an indictment on him as a player, and more so just a result of the 3 players before him all having incredibly strong starts to the year, while we haven't seen him play at all yet, but when he gets going, he's definitely going to put himself back in the mix at the very top of this class as one of, if not the best scorers and athletes available. Next up, with the 3rd pick in the draft, the Washington Wizards select Jalen Suggs from Gonzaga. Suggs started the season absolutely on fire, and even though he's cooled down a little bit lately, I'm still a huge believer in his talent and the fact that he will translate to the NBA level. He's an incredible floor general who makes terrific passes and makes life easier for those around him. He's one of the best downhill drivers in the whole class when he gets ahead of steam, who converts well around the rim, and he's a confident shooter from the outside. Plus, he competes hard on defense and should be one of the better perimeter defenders available as well. He was everything you want from a starting point guard in the NBA, which is why he's in my top 3 right now. Next up, with the second pick in the draft, the Minnesota Timberwolves select Evan Mobley from USC. There is a lot of talent at the top of this draft, so after the first pick, I think the Wolves will go with the player who fits their team the best, being Evan Mobley. Karl-Anthony Towns has always worked best with a defensive anchor alongside him. The team just hasn't been able to find a permanent solution for that role yet, and with Mobley being the best defensive big man in the class, it's a perfect match. Mobley has a lot of Bam Adebayo in him, meaning that on top of being a rim protector, he can hold his own when switched out onto the perimeter, and offensively, he's very versatile and can be used in many different sequences, both inside and out, once again to work to the needs of Karl-Anthony Towns. And finally, with the number 1 pick in the draft, the Detroit Pistons select Cade Cunningham from Oklahoma State. Cunningham came into the season seen by most as the best player in the draft, and he's played up to that hype to still deserve that title. He's a 6'8" point guard with unbelievable basketball IQ, he can score from all 3 levels, he impacts the game in so many different ways just to top it all off. Because of Cunningham's size, he can fit into any lineup alongside other guards or wing players and defend positions 1 through 4, so even though the Pistons just drafted Killian Hayes last year, it wouldn't stop them from pouncing on the opportunity to add someone of Cunningham's talent level. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below who you want your favorite team to draft right now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.